Imagine stepping through massive, iron-bound gates into a world trapped in time, where narrow cobblestone streets twist like a maze. The smell of baked bread mingles with smoke and stench, and every shadow could hide danger or opportunity. Inside these stone walls, life bursts with color and chaos, merchants shouting their wares, children darting between legs, blacksmiths hammering molten iron, and taverns alive with laughter, music, and secrets. But behind the laughter lies danger. Plagues, fires, thieves, and rival armies threaten every day. This is a city where survival depends on skill, courage, and cunning, and where the stories of ordinary people weave together to create a living, breathing world. Step inside and discover what life was really like behind the stone walls of a medieval city. The sun was just beginning to rise when the first horns sounded from the watchtowers above the massive stone gates. The sound echoed far across the fields where farmers and traders waited with their wagons. For them, this moment, the opening of the city gates, was the beginning of life itself. The walls were tall and weather-beaten, built to withstand enemy armies and the passing of centuries, and they gave the city an air of invincibility. To an outsider, these walls seemed like the edge of a fortress, but to those who lived within, they were the very skin of their world. The gates opened slowly with the grinding sound of heavy iron chains, and one by one carts rolled over the drawbridge. Horses snorted, chickens clucked nervously inside wooden cages, and merchants wiped the dust from their cloaks as they prepared to step into the crowded streets. Guards stood on either side, scanning faces, demanding tolls, and checking goods for contraband. Their halberds gleamed faintly in the morning light, a silent warning to anyone who thought of causing trouble. Inside, the city was already alive. Narrow streets twisted like a maze, lined with timber-framed houses whose upper stories leaned toward each other until it seemed they might meet in the middle. The smell hit first. Fresh bread baking in the ovens of the bakeries, smoke rising from blacksmith forges, and the less pleasant stench of waste and animals. Water trickled through open drains that cut across the cobblestones, carrying away everything that people tossed out of their homes. It was messy, crowded, and noisy, but to the people of the time it was home. At the heart of the entrance lay the first market stalls. Farmers displayed bundles of onions, baskets of eggs, and jars of honey. Women in woolen dresses called out prices in loud voices, and customers haggled without shame, knowing that the art of bargaining was as essential as the goods themselves. A spice trader recently arrived from distant lands opened a small pouch and let customers smell the sharp, exotic scent of cinnamon as if offering them a whiff of another world. Children darted between the legs of customers, sometimes carrying baskets, sometimes slipping sticky fingers into unattended purses. But beyond the lively trade, there was something deeper in the air, a sense of protection. Everyone knew the dangers that lurked outside the walls. Raiders, wolves, highwaymen, even rival lords. The walls were more than stone. They were safety. Within them, people could laugh, argue, work, and live without constant fear of being burned out of their homes. That's why so many came here, from distant villages and lonely farms. A medieval city was not only a place of commerce but also of survival. For the newcomer stepping through the gates for the first time, it felt like entering a world unto itself. Every sound, every smell, every sight was magnified, overwhelming yet alive. This was life behind the stone walls, a place where fortunes could be made, secrets could be hidden, and history was written in the cobblestones. By mid-morning, the city's marketplace had transformed into a roaring sea of voices. The square was packed with people from every corner of the land. Farmers with dirt still under their fingernails, guildmasters in fine tunics, beggars with outstretched hands, and travelers carrying strange goods. The sound was overwhelming. Merchants shouting prices, customers arguing over pennies, chickens squawking in wicker cages, and donkeys braying as they dragged carts full of hay or barrels of ale. The market was not just a place to buy and sell. It was the city's beating heart, where every pulse of life could be felt. The smell of roasted meat mingled with that of fresh bread, making stomachs growl as people passed rows of food stalls. Bakers displayed loaves of brown rye, their crusts hard, but their insides warm and filling. Fishmongers laid out salted herring and fresh trout, their stalls buzzing with flies but still drawing hungry buyers. And near the center, a brewer poured foaming ale into wooden mugs for thirsty laborers who had worked since sunrise. For the wealthy, the marketplace offered luxuries. Traders from distant lands brought silks that shimmered like water in the sun, glass beads in shades of blue and green, and spices so rare that their price could feed a poor family for a month. Cinnamon, pepper, saffron, names that carried with them the promise of distant lands and unimaginable wealth. The rich purchased these items to flaunt their power, while the poor watched in awe, dreaming of a life beyond their reach. But the marketplace was not only about goods. It was about people. Apprentices stood nervously beside their masters, hoping to prove themselves in front of customers. Children ran between stalls carrying water jugs or small baskets of bread to sell. Musicians played fiddles and flutes, their tunes weaving through the noise, drawing small crowds who clapped and tossed coins into wooden bowls. Even actors and jesters used the square as their stage, performing short plays or tricks to entertain the crowd. Yet, in every corner, shadows lurked. Pickpockets slipped silently through the crowd, their fingers quick and clever, snatching coins or bread rolls when no one was looking. The city watch patrolled slowly, halberds in hand, their eyes sharp for troublemakers. Sometimes, when a thief was caught, the punishment was immediate. A public beating or a day chained in the stocks, where passers-by threw rotten vegetables as humiliation. Justice here was swift and brutal, meant to remind everyone that order was as important as trade. For the townsfolk, the market was more than a place of business. It was where news spread. A new law from the Lord, a rumor of war, the arrival of a foreign ship, all of it traveled on whispers and shouts across the square. By the time the church bell rang noon, the marketplace was not just alive with trade, but with the stories that held the city together. Behind the stone walls, the market was the stage on which all of life played out. Rich and poor, honest and cunning, hopeful and desperate. They all met here, weaving together the tangled fabric of medieval city life. As the afternoon sun slanted across the rooftops, life inside the homes and workshops of the city carried its own rhythm. The streets outside were loud and chaotic, but step through a doorway, and you entered another world, one defined by family, craft and duty. Most families lived in narrow, timber-framed houses, often no more than 2 rooms stacked one on top of the other. The ground floor was usually reserved for business, a shop selling cloth, a blacksmith's forge or a carpenter's workshop. Behind it, a smoky kitchen where a pot of stew simmered over the fire, filling the air with the smell of barley and turnips. Above, cramped wooden stairs led to sleeping quarters. Here, entire families slept together on straw mattresses, their lives intertwined so tightly that privacy barely existed. The richer merchants had larger houses, built with stone foundations and sometimes boasting colorful glass windows. Inside, tapestries hung on the walls to keep out the damp, and heavy wooden chests stored fine clothes and coins. A wealthy family's meals might include roasted meat, cheese, and fresh fruit, while poorer neighbors survived mostly on bread, pottage, and thin ale. Yet, whether rich or poor, the rhythm of life was shaped by work. In every corner of the city, workshops rang with sound. The blacksmith's hammer struck hot iron, sparks flying as he shaped nails, horseshoes, and tools. The tanner worked in the stink of animal hides, his hands stained with dyes and oils. The weaver sat at her loom, the rhythmic click and clack echoing through the wooden beams. Children were rarely idle. Apprentices as young as 7 or 8 swept floors, stirred vats, or fetched tools, learning by watching and doing, and over it all loomed the power of the guilds. To practice a craft, you had to belong to one. Guilds were more than associations. They were families, protectors, and gatekeepers of knowledge. A blacksmith's guild ensured no outsider undercut prices. A weaver's guild set the quality of cloth. A baker's guild regulated the weight of loaves so no one cheated customers. Joining a guild meant safety and stability, but also obedience to strict rules. Apprenticeship was often the first step. A boy might be sent by his parents to live with a master craftsman for years, serving him in exchange for training. After long service and grueling tests, he could become a journeyman, traveling from city to city with his tools, seeking work. Only the most skilled could rise to master, owning their own workshop, hiring apprentices and gaining a respected place in the city council. Evenings brought a brief pause from labor. Families gathered around the fire, eating simple meals while telling stories or listening to travelers recount tales of distant lands. Outside, the muffled sounds of the city continued. Laughter from taverns, the clanging of a distant forge, the tolling of the church bell. Life inside the walls was hard, but it was also vibrant, woven from countless small stories of survival, ambition, and pride in one's craft. Behind the stone walls, a city was not just a collection of buildings. It was a living tapestry, stitched together by the hands of those who worked, dreamed, and endured within it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the atmosphere within the city changed. The towering gates, once open to travelers and traders, creaked shut with the grinding of chains. The heavy wooden doors were locked and barred, sealing the city off from the world outside. Bandits, wolves, and wandering armies could do no harm now. The walls stood tall, their watchmen carrying torches that cast flickering light across the battlements. For those inside, safety came at the cost of confinement. But within those stone walls, night was far from quiet. The city seemed to take on a new life, one that pulsed with laughter, music, and danger. Taverns spilled their light and noise into the streets. Inside, men crowded around wooden tables, mugs of frothy ale in hand. The smell of roasted meat and spilled beer filled the air, mingling with pipe smoke that drifted lazily to the ceiling. Dice clattered, coins exchanged hands, and cheers erupted when someone won, or shouts when someone lost too much. Storytellers earned their keep here. A wandering bard strummed his lute and sang tales of knights and lovers, while jesters cracked crude jokes that had men roaring with laughter. But not every corner was filled with joy. Shadows hid men who dealt in secrets, traders of stolen goods and gamblers who had lost more than they could pay. A knife flashed quickly in the dark, and sometimes a drunk never made it home. Meanwhile, the streets outside the taverns told their own story. Candlelight glowed faintly behind the shutters of homes, where families huddled close, eating their evening meals or whispering prayers before sleep. Workshops closed, though some masters kept apprentices working late by candlelight, their weary eyes straining over leather, cloth, or iron. For a few, the night was the only time to get ahead. The church bells marked the passing hours, their solemn toll echoing over the rooftops. Monks in cloisters prayed through the night, their chants carrying faintly across the city. The contrast was stark, taverns bursting with chaos while cathedrals stood in stillness, reminding the people of the eternal presence of God even in their earthly troubles. Yet for many the night carried fear. The narrow alleys were poorly lit, and crime thrived there. Pickpockets and cutthroats found easy prey in the unwary. The city watch patrolled with lanterns and halberds, but they could not be everywhere. Mothers told their children stories of thieves and spirits that roamed the dark, urging them to stay indoors after sunset. Still, there was a strange beauty in the nighttime city. The torches glowed on the walls, the stars hung above like distant candles, and the hum of life continued within. Behind the stone walls, night was a reminder of both the fragility and resilience of the people. How they laughed, prayed, schemed, and endured until the gates creaked open again at dawn. Life behind the stone walls was never simple. The city offered protection from the chaos of the outside world, yet it brought its own dangers. Fires could erupt at any moment, fueled by narrow streets, wooden beams, and thatched roofs. One careless spark from a baker's oven or a blacksmith's forge could set entire blocks ablaze. When flames roared, smoke blackened the sky, and people ran through the streets shouting, carrying children, food, and whatever belongings they could save. In such moments, the city's strength, the stone walls, offered little comfort because destruction came from within. Disease was another constant threat. Plague, dysentery, and smallpox stalked the crowded streets. Poor sanitation, open drains, and tightly packed homes made the spread swift and deadly. When sickness struck, fear gripped the city more fiercely than any army. Bells tolled endlessly to mark the dead, carts carried bodies to hastily dug graves, and families were left isolated, praying for survival. Yet even in these darkest times, life persisted. Traders reopened their stalls, craftsmen returned to their workshops, and children, resilient and unaware of the danger, ran through the streets as though nothing had happened. Sieges and political unrest added another layer of tension. Lords and rival kingdoms coveted these fortified cities for their wealth and strategic position. Archers perched on battlements and soldiers drilled tirelessly within the walls. Every citizen, from the richest merchant to the poorest beggar, understood that the city's stone walls were both shield and battleground. When enemies arrived, the market squares could empty overnight, turning from places of trade into zones of defense. The clang of metal and the smell of smoke became routine, reminders that survival required vigilance. Yet despite all hardships, the medieval city endured because of its people. Behind every shuttered window, every smoky hearth, and every forge, life continued. Families celebrated marriages, christened children, and mourned the dead. Apprentices became masters. Merchants grew their businesses, and the marketplace never lost its energy. Even the poor found community in guilds and neighborhoods, sharing what little they had. The city was a living organism, built not only from stone and timber, but from resilience, hope, and human ingenuity. And when the gates opened each morning, the city awoke once more. The market buzzed, the forges rang, and the streets filled with voices, laughter, and occasional arguments. Life behind the stone walls was harsh, unpredictable, and often frightening. But it was also vibrant, rich, and full of possibility. Each stone, each alley, and each tower carried stories of survival, ambition, and the indomitable spirit of those who called the city home. In the end, the medieval city was not just a place. It was life itself, alive in the people who lived, worked, dreamed, and endured within its walls. As the sun sets beyond the towering walls, the city exhales a tired but steady rhythm. Life continues inside. Families gather around warm fires, merchants prepare for the next day, and children chase shadows along the narrow streets. Behind every door, every forge, and every marketplace stall, stories of survival, ambition, and courage quietly unfold. The stone walls have seen generations rise and fall, yet the city endures, a testament to human resilience. Behind these walls, life was never easy, but it was alive. Messy, chaotic, dangerous, and endlessly fascinating. In the heart of the medieval city, every stone whispered a story, every street carried history, and every soul left a mark that time could never erase.